Hello and welcome to the Youthwork Plus podcast. I'm Becky Lawrence, your host, and I'm joined today by our special guest, Mike. Who is he? What's his connection to us? And what's his connection to youth and children's work? We will soon find out. So Mike is from the 267 Project based in St Albans. We've known each other for a few years now. We sort of connected through mutual love of youth work. Yeah. I can't remember how we first connected. I think maybe it was on social media. Was it? During COVID, maybe?
Yeah, and then maybe a diocesan event, I think.
Maybe. Yeah, probably. Yeah. And so, we run two similar but different charities that help support youth and kids workers. But yeah, I'll let Mike introduce himself and tell you a little bit more about who he is, what he does. Off you go.
Wow. I've tried to. I was now trying to think when we did meet, but
yeah.
And then we did a retreat together. I remember that.
We did that, yeah.
In a very nice place called Jordan's Mill. I seem to remember the food was quite good. I don't know why I always remember the food above everything else. Maybe that's my love language. So I head up 267, and we've been going 17 years this year, which I'm trying to think what the equivalent would be of, a teenager to learning to drive. What is that? What's the equivalent in the charity world that we can learn to drive now and cause chaos on the streets? Maybe that's where our next season is. But I've been a youth worker for probably pretty much my whole adult life, which is quite a while. So yeah, and 267, like Becky said, we're in St Albans in the wide area, and we're really similar to Youthwork Plus in that we just want people to get even better at what they do, to sort of take people's gifts and passions and almost accelerate it and give them places where they can meet others like them and opportunities to sort of learn from one another as well. Yeah, so I love it. Yeah, there's nobody in the office today, so it's a good day to record.
Good. And Mike, how, obviously you said you've been involved in youth and kids ministry for a long time.
Yeah.
How did you first get involved? What was your entry point?
So a lovely lady called Janet, who is now, when I met her, I thought she was old, and I still know her, and she's old now. So wow. I think that's it. So she's still doing youth work in Thailand, and she's in her late 70s. Wow. And she was my youth leader, and I was, shall we say, not a straightforward teenager. Life was a bit chaotic. And she invited me to come and play football with a bunch of 11-year-olds. I was maybe 16, 17 at the time. And I thought, I don't like people. I don't like anyone. I didn't even like myself. But I did like football. I did like games. So I ended up just playing football every week. And then out of that, she invited me to do sort of the youth group and weekend away and stuff like that. And weekends away were quite a tipping point for me. I love residentials. I love those spaces away that are slightly, they disarm us a bit. And so, Janet, I get to meet every now and again. A lot of what I am was because of her, pretty much.
And so what was your first youth kids ministry job?
Wow. So I was an outdoor instructor for the, I think, famed Frontier Centre in Northamptonshire, which I know you've been to.
I know it, yep.
It has an abseil tower, which I fell off, which was the turning point of my youth ministry career, because I thought I was going to be an outdoor instructor for the whole time. I was doing the qualification there. And then I took a fall, not because of anyone's fault, and couldn't do any of the sort of outdoor work. So I started going into the local primary school and sort of offering to do youth work there. And then I realised that actually I loved doing that more than I did all the outdoor pursuits. So I started looking for jobs. I didn't really think youth work was a job back then. I thought it was like, you were a vicar or you're a volunteer. Yeah. And so, I came to Hertfordshire for my first youth work job in 1996, which was a while ago.
Yeah. And then what's the journey look like along the way? What other jobs have you done?
I think I loved working for my church. I worked for a church for about 4 years, and then got called to go to America and work for an organisation, or volunteer for an organisation called Young Life, who are over in this country as well. Now, they weren't sort of in the early 2000s, they were quite sort of young. But what their strength is, they sort of worked with the furthest to reach kids. So the kids that wouldn't walk through our church doors, that wouldn't come to our youth groups. And I was really fascinated by what this sort of relational youth work looks like. Because I loved my youth work, and we had a really thriving youth group. But then I was thinking about, what about all the ones that aren't in my church and are in school and are on the streets, that we did detached work and stuff like that. And so I came back a little bit more passionate to sort of build a bridge between church and the community. So after coming back from America, I went back to my church and said, could you create a new job? Because they wanted me to come back. That was effectively, rather than being at the church end of the bridge, it was at the community end of the bridge. And so that's what I created. And I was there for another 4.5 years. And I think that learning in that 4.5 years helped me see both the community aspect, the school aspect, and the church aspect. And so out of that, 267 almost was a bit of a hybrid of all that learning to say, actually, how can we help anyone do youth work to create connecting points between youth workers and schools workers and church leaders and volunteers? And that's what 267 tries to be this encouragement to youth work in any environment, really.
Yeah. And so how did you mentioned it there, that 267 sort of launched off the back of that experience. Yeah. But like, how did all of that happen? Like, how did you get the vision for 267, and how did that?
Yeah, so I came back from America at the end of 2001, and then went back in 2003 to the International Youthwork Convention, which was, as you can imagine, America was an insane thing. But it just the way they valued youth work was off the scale. So all the frustrations that we have over here sometimes of how we are valued as youth workers, how we are financially invested in, young people's role within sort of church and youth ministries being almost a battle all the time over here. Whereas obviously they're not without their challenges in America, but there was this sort of positive sort of approach, and this sort of, what I call the Americans affectionately arrogant, because you can't hate them for wanting to try again. And so if it all goes, they throw everything into a massive thing and it all goes completely pear-shaped, they just dust themselves off and get back up again. And I quite like that. Whereas over here we get, we tried that and it didn't work, so let's not do that ever again. And so that sort of energy that I discovered at this conference, together with my time in America, I thought, well, actually, I loved working for a church, but what would it look like to work for lots of churches effectively, to be a resource? Because as a full-time youth worker, you can go to conferences, you can spend time scouring the internet for resources, you can read books. But if you're a volunteer, and most churches their youth and kids work are run by volunteers, how would you access that sort of energy to be able to help your youth and kids ministry? And I thought, actually, how could I create something that could be that sort of resource? I wasn't trying to be sort of, take over or anything like that. It was to say, actually, how could you almost again build these bridges so any volunteer, any church leader, any new youth leader could find a space where someone would be for them. And so, just one slightly musty church hall in 2007, I gathered a bunch of friends and said, this is my idea, and said, would you bankroll the first year? And we raised 14,000 in pledges that week, and that was just me. And now 17 years later, there's a team of 6 of us. Our budget's slightly higher, but with a slightly higher budget, you've got to work harder at getting it. But we've had the privilege of spending 17 years gathering people, which is what I love doing, helping churches by giving them ideas and resources, cheering them on, and buying a lot of breakfasts for youth leaders, because that's where we come alive, where we can sit and just talk about life together.
Yeah, amazing.
It's been quite fun.
Yeah. And like along that journey, how do you think God has led, moved, changed you along the way?
Well, I thought about it. So I wasn't going to give this answer, but I decided to give this answer. I think early on, I used to call it my project because I was the only one. It wasn't until year 6 we got our second employee. And I think one of the damages that did was any time something didn't go quite right or a trustee challenged me, I got really defensive. And I realised I just need to say to God, can you take my ego out of the equation? You know, this wasn't about size of ministry. It wasn't about better ministry. I just had to make it. How could I just be for other people rather than for myself? And weirdly, it sounds egotistical to say that, but it was like an undoing of when you're a youth worker in one church. It's like you're trying to big yourself up, whereas actually the whole aim of 267 is to give everything away and make everybody else's youth work succeed. So I think when that happened, then I started to really see, you know, our networking was really energized and our gathering, and it maybe people weren't threatened by me because I was invested in relationships and I was for them. And so out of that, we had this sort of almost like a bleeding out of people knowing us and wanting to be where we were, not because of what necessarily we were about, but that we created these spaces where youth work was talked about, and we wanted to make each other better, and we wanted each other's events to succeed. Whether your youth work was tiny and embryonic or if it was massive and well established, we wanted to say, actually, how can we? So the verse 267 comes from Colossians, which is rooted, built up, strengthened, thankful. And the aim is wherever we see any youth work, we want to root it, we want to build it up, we want to strengthen it, and we want to give that, we want to celebrate it. And I think that sort of pivotal point of me making it not about me changed a lot of things, I think.
Yeah, thanks. Good lesson to learn. And have you got any ministry highlights from either 267 or thinking further back?
Yeah, the fact that people pay me to do this job is still a bit bemusing. I think highlights. I think probably not sort of say anything we did, but going to that American conference in 2003, I think it was a tiny thing, and it's not really a ministry highlight, but it shaped me. And I was standing in a Starbucks queue with this guy chatting, and you have your badge, it says where you're from, and he sort of noticed I was from the UK, and then sort of asked those great American questions of, do I know the Queen, and, you know, all things like that. And I sort of said, yeah, we're good mates. We have coffee dates every week. And we got chatting and having a bit of a laugh. And then he was ordering coffee for maybe 6-8 people. And then he took the receipt and he opened this sort of leather folder, A4 folder, and had a clip, and then put this receipt under it and sort of closed this folder. And we were chatting. I said, look, I hope you don't mind me asking. I said, do you claim back for everything, like your coffee and everything? And he sat me down and he said, we come to this conference every year from our church in Florida. There's 32 of us. And our church knows how much these youth leaders give. Most of them were volunteers. He said he knows how much these youth leaders give. So if they're going to come here and try and get better at what they do, it should cost them nothing. They should not have to worry about any resource or food or anything. And every night in that conference, there was a brand new resource on your chair. So I remember the first copy of the message, I got that. There was CDs back when that was the thing. And every night, and it was just this sort of generosity towards youth ministry that made me go, that's what I want to talk about. That's what I want it to be about. And it completely changed me. So even though it wasn't a highlight event of what we did, it shaped me to say, this is how important youth work is. If I can make a youth leader feel that valued, they're still going to be doing it in a year's time. And so that sort of shapes a lot of what I do, and why my amazing treasurer, Nigel, says anything I spend on my hospitality budget, he says you can always have more, because he knows those times are so significant. I think the other probably key event, which was sort of we instigated, was that first big event post the COVID madness. So summer 2021, we we used to run a New Year's house party, but we couldn't do it in 2020 for obvious reasons. So we did a summer house party called Back to Life. And the whole idea was to create this space where we could all almost be together again. And I still remember we had to go through loads of hoops. We were still under a few tiny restrictions. But I look back now at the video, I look back at the photos, I talked to people who were there, and it did exactly what we wanted it to. It brought people back to life. And there was lots of things about it that I was really just feeling really blessed about. So two very different things that are sort of highlights, really.
Yeah, good highlights there. And just want to swing back to asking a bit more about 267, because obviously I know about it, but listeners might not. So like if you had to explain 267 and who you are and what you do in a nutshell, kind of how unpack that a little bit more for us.
Do you know, this is a new explanation, okay, Becky. I'll give you this. It's almost hot off the press. Because I think one of our challenges of the last year is trying to explain who we are. And I think if you'd have asked us 6-7 years ago, we would be an organisation that would run events for people to come to. That was what we did. We were like so if you only had 2 or 3 kids in your youth group, you could never do a weekend away. If you only had 1 or 2 volunteers, a training evening wouldn't really work. So we would be that organisation that would run these critical mass events. And we still do that, but 6-7 years ago, that was what we were known for. There'd be 267 events. And I think the last couple of years, I think the evolution of what we're about has changed, because I was in a national a youth ministry prayer summit earlier in the year. And somebody that didn't know me asked me about 267, and I sort of looked at her like I didn't know what 267 was. It was really bizarre. I sort of stuttered over my words, and I was like, yeah, and we've been struggling with this. What are we for about a year and a half now? And then we prayed, as always good to do when you're stuttering. And out of it, this image of, obviously I'm never going to run a marathon, but I've seen people run marathons. And I had this vision, and I've told it to people multiple times since this moment, and they were like, that is exactly what you're about. And the idea is, when you see someone running a marathon, there's a whole bunch of people that enable them to finish the marathon. So there might be the guy that runs right next to them, so your running mate that's just helping you keep pace, stuff like that. There might be someone on the sideline that's cheering you on, you know, that's just almost every time you do a mile, they're ahead of you going, you know, I'm going to go mile 22. I'll see you when you get there. You make sure you get there. And then there's someone that is sort of, when you've pulled a calf muscle and you're limping, they're going to stand next to you and carry you for a little bit. And then sort of pre-marathon, there's people that train you. And I realised that is what we're about, is that my heart is to help those involved in youth ministry to still be doing youth ministry in a year's time. And so 267 almost changes depending on what each individual needs at the time. And that doesn't mean we exhaust ourselves by doing everything. It means we just can be quite responsive, but also we want to create a culture and spaces when we gather people that do all of those things. So it cheers you on. It allows you to be carried by someone. It allows you to have a running mate, a like-minded person. And I think the more I've talked about this idea, it's then stopped being that 267 is an organisation that runs events A, B and C, but we are simply for youth ministry and helping it finish the marathon or complete the race or whatever it is. I think that's where I am.
Yeah, good analogy.
It might change next week, but
yeah.
No, hopefully not. I feel quite happy about it.
Good, yeah. No stuttering there.
No. And I think what it is because it's not about an event. Because as you know, you can run. We ran Back to Life in 2021, probably the greatest youth ministry weekend I've ever done. We tried it again the year after. 4 people signed up. So I'm just aware, if you shape you around an event, because the world is changing and young people's lives are changing and finance changes and people leave. So by what I think we're talking about now is we're trying to be this culture that we just want to be for it in any space, whether I'm having coffee with one person or I'm recording a podcast or I'm, hanging out at the National Youth Ministry weekend. All of it is to the end game is to cheer people on and say, I want to help you still be doing this in a year's time, because that's what we need to be doing.
Yeah. Cool. And we're about halfway through. So it's the point in the interview where you get to ask me a fun question.
Sorry. I've got like 20.
Well, I'm going to limit it to 2.
I really only have 1 actually, but
well, yeah, 1 or 2. It's up to you.
You can have 2. You can have my classic icebreaker one.
Okay.
And then you can have my proper question. So my classic icebreaker at the moment is, and there is a right answer. Would you rather fight 1 horse-sized duck or 100 duck-sized horses?
I'm not sure. I think both both are difficult. Both will be difficult in different ways.
Yeah, but there's only one right answer. In my opinion. You got to choose one, Becky. Come on.
I think. I'm not
I
sure.
can't even pressured you with a duck horse question.
Yeah,
the second one's going to be so dull comparatively.
Probably the 100 small ones.
Well, that's a shame you died. Great answer, but I think it's always one. It's always you only want to fight one thing, surely.
Yeah, maybe.
Have you seen the hooves on horses? Can you imagine imagine they've got 4 feet? Can you imagine 400 hooves at your head?
Yeah, that would be not great.
Although some people say, can you imagine a duck sort of towering?
Yeah, the big one seems quite overwhelming though as well at the same time.
Yeah, but apparently they're rubbish at going backwards, so you can just go behind it. And
I've never seen one go backwards. Actually, that's the thing.
There you go. I've thought about this question a lot. When other people went to school and studied degrees, I thought about questions like that.
Yeah, would you rather questions?
Would you rather questions? They're the best questions in the world. My other question for you though: if you didn't do a job anything to do with youth work or church, what would your job be?
Oh, I like this question. I think about this sometimes. on days where I'm like, why am I in? Yeah, on days when I'm like, why am I in this job?
Yeah,
like I should be doing something else. I think that if I wasn't doing a youth work related job, I would so before doing youth work, like one of my first jobs was like working in a shop, which I hated. So I know I definitely wouldn't want to go. I worked for a few different shops. I worked for British Home Stores.
Wow.
Yep. One of the original British department stores.
Wow.
On the high street in Luton. Growing up, and that was my first job, and I started working there when I was 15 on the weekend. But yeah, I hated it. Other than the fact that I got Greggs for lunch every day, that I worked there, which was amazing.
Wow. They had Greggs back then.
Yeah, but there was. I don't know whether
modern phenomenon.
I don't know whether. Yeah, I remember getting Greggs, but then I did work there for like 6 years.
Okay.
So perhaps Greggs was the latter end of that time. I don't know whether they were there the whole time.
So you're saying you'd probably be working in a shop?
No, I'm saying I wouldn't want to do that.
Oh, okay.
Part of me thinks that that's where I'd be, but then I also hated it, so I don't think I'd go back to that. When I think of on those days where I'm like, why am I doing this? I always think that I'd be doing something like hotel receptionist.
Okay.
That's where my brain goes. But then I always think I wouldn't enjoy that in the long term.
Yeah. I don't know, but I probably quite like that.
I think I'd enjoy it for a while.
Yeah.
And then I'd be like, why am I doing this for?
Yeah. Oh well, I won't hold you to it. You're doing great. This job.
Yeah.
You don't need to change.
Yeah. But I think if I had to get like another job, like say, I don't know.
Like a proper job.
Like, no, I mean, as well as what I'm doing.
Okay.
Like if I had to make, I don't know, for some reason more money.
Yeah.
I'd probably get an extra job, like working either, I've thought about this, Either they've got like a little champagne counter in Harrods Beauty in Milton Keynes.
Wow.
Sometimes I think, oh, it'd be good to work there, wouldn't it?
Wow.
Just serving champagne and
That is a hard
coffees and
life.
stuff. They've got like a little corner of the place, and I always walk past there and I think, who goes in there to like have a little champagne break? I don't know who those kind of people are.
In Milton Keynes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
But I think that would be quite a cool job. Or I also had a job pre youth work and as an extra job when I was interning doing youth work as a barista in a coffee shop.
Oh, yeah.
That was stressful, but also quite fun.
Yeah.
Because when we had off time, we just practiced making coffees and got to drink them.
Yes. See, I'm all there. Aspirational. That's what I want to do.
Yeah. So if I had to get an extra job, like, I don't know, for some reason, I think it'd probably be doing that. Yeah.
In an independent coffee shop, though.
Ideally, although I wouldn't. Yeah, they tend to be more the non-independent ones tend to not make such artistic coffee.
Yeah, that's true.
Anymore, because like they don't have time for it, or
just trying to churn it out.
Yeah, they're just trying to churn it out as quick as possible.
Yeah.
So yeah.
No, I like that. I could see you doing that.
Yeah. How about you? What would you do?
On the wall, Becky, your barista.
Yeah, I want to know what you'd do if you weren't doing what you're doing.
I dither between being a hitman.
Okay.
I think that's probably got quite a high satisfaction rating.
Yeah.
But obviously, ethically is a little bit, or morally is a little bit challenging. I think either a chef or a photographer.
Okay. Those are three very different things.
Yeah. I like taking pictures.
Yeah.
And I like cooking.
Yeah. So getting paid for them would be like
I don't think I'll be very good at getting paid for them. I don't think I'll be a very good hitman either. I'd probably feel really bad.
I also think sometimes I spend time thinking like what other career is like similar but different. And I always think like kids TV presenter.
Yes, I can see you doing that.
Yeah, would be quite a fun job. But then I also think if I was doing that, I'd be not very satisfied as well.
Yeah. I wanted to be a fireman when I was a kid. I quite like, if I was 20 years younger and fitter, I think I'd be a fireman. Realise that's past now.
Yeah.
But yeah. Thankfully, God has called me where I am, and I don't need to kill people or train to be a firefighter.
Yeah.
You can edit
Thank
that.
Goodness. Thank goodness.
Yeah. Thankfully, I got saved, so I didn't become a hitman.
Yeah. Let's go back to the questions. What area of youth, kids, family ministry are you most passionate about, and why?
No, I thought about this. I think this is quite a clear answer. I think the residentials. So we, like I was saying earlier, one of the things that's hard for some churches to do is to run any sort of trip, because they take quite a lot of work and to make them safe and appropriate. Yeah. So we, ever since the project began, the first year we ran sort of weekend away for 2 or 3 youth groups. And so I think residentials, because they create this sort of pause in the everyday life. Yeah. You get to start and end your days together. You get to share meals together. You get to have that increasing depth of conversation that just can't happen with that 20, 25-minute youth group time. And someone once said it's a weekend away is a year's worth of youth work in a weekend. And it's so true because of the acceleration of faith conversations, of relationships between people. And so we take away 7-year-olds up to students, and we take them away 3 or 4 times a year. And they've always been the things that I come back to. And almost personally, when you're doing them, when you're mid-weekend and you're utterly exhausted, or you're frustrated because something's not wrong, there's still this sense of this is what I'm meant to do. And we're really good at this. And so we love doing stuff like that. And up until last year, we had a standard venue we went to for like 12 years, and they just sold it. And so we found it a really hard year to be able to do residentials because we haven't got anywhere to go. That's financially sort of appropriate. So
Yeah.
one of our sort of side sort of vision hustles is to find our own space to have as a venue ourselves, to sort of manage ourselves, because we think we'd be able to do so much with that. I think the other thing that just I'm passionate about is this sort of gift discovery of, particularly, I think it is for kids as well, but I think as you become a teenager, and if people's faith, God grabs hold of them, what is it in their character and in their passions and in the things they love doing that God could put to use for pointing other people to Him? That is something which is not only fulfilling for the individual, it is a tool that the church needs to grab hold of, because they bring such life to our spaces. Can you imagine what the sort of creativity and the energy and the problem-solving skills young people could bring to some of the challenges the wider church faces? So I think this sort of space to get gift discovery and say, actually, when we say the phrase, what is God calling you to do? We sometimes force young people to think of something which is a bit more of an appropriate church answer, rather than saying, actually, you love football, you love making online content, you love music, you love hospitality, you've got a big garden at home and you always got your mates over. How do we access those passions and gifts for greater things, to help people? And I think that gift discovery is something I'm always really keen. And weirdly, those two things are connected, because when you have that slightly unhurried time with people, you realize what God's doing in them, and the things that they're really good at, and the things that make them laugh, and the things that God just nudges you in. And then you can go away from there and say, actually, we need to give them more opportunities in this. So I think those two, even though they don't look like they're linked, they're probably massively linked, because you can't really discover those things about people until you've spent that really intentional quality time with them.
Yeah, thank you. Those are good. And why, Mike, do you think it's important for the church to engage with children and young people as a whole?
This is almost one of those, just because it is, it's one of those, because I said so. I think the church is a black and white telly, and the kids and young people are the colour. And for some reason, we're resisting. We're on this tube box telly, when screaming from the background is this sky glass 4K wonder that is just trying to be heard. And I think not only are the challenges that kids and young people face in this day and age that we never did, which we can't do anything about, that it's just the world we're in. They need the church to be behind them, to be for them, to be offering safe spaces, to have mentoring available to them. But we forget it isn't just about what the church can offer them. We forget equally, and if not more in greater ways, is what we need them to do for us as adults. And and I said to someone the other day, and their child was making some noise, and I said, mate, if the kids aren't making noise, our church is dead. I said, if I can't hear kids in our church, something's gone. I don't want to be part of that church. I don't want them being shushed. I think obviously there's a whole conversation about respect. That's a different thing. But there is this life and colour and vibrancy that all kids and young people bring. And for some reason as a church, we've tried to manage it rather than fully embracing it. And so I think we can offer kids and young people a lot, but they can offer us probably more. And from every bit of research I've read and person I've talked to, if you embrace youth and kids work, your whole church grows, not just the youth and kids work. And we know the statistics. 80% of people come to faith before they're 18, and yet why does the church not operate like that? I think it's this the vibrancy and the colour I think we've lost. We're watching a black and white telly and thinking this is all there is. But that, I don't want to whinge about it, but you and I know we've been in this game long enough. That is what the evidence tells us, that the church is like that. And not every church all the time, don't get me wrong. There is some great ministry going on that wonderfully we get to see, you and I. We bump into it. But as a whole, it's not got that vibrancy that it should have. Which is one of the reasons that we want to keep people in youth ministry, people that are fighting for young people to be involved. Even my hesitancy to go to the vicar factory I don't think it's my calling, but to grab those vicars that have that heart for youth, kids and families ministry, how do we give them the resources to be able to really do that, but also talk to the adults in their church and say, this is why you need to get behind it. You can't automatically go, well, it's an all-age service. That's not for me. I'm not going to go to church. That doesn't help anyone. And so how do you have those conversations with the whole church to say, actually, when you encourage your youth and kids ministry, it brings life to the whole church, not just the youth and kids ministry.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm preaching to the choir with you.
But yeah, I know. Definitely. I mean, if every church's kids and youth ministry was thriving, then charities like ours wouldn't be needed.
Yeah.
So
I don't mind. I'm happy to be put out of a job by that.
Yeah.
Becky. I don't mind that. I've got my backup of being a hitman, so I'm all good. Or chef. Okay.
Yeah. What shall I ask you next? Is there anything that we can pray for you in what you do? Or like how can, also along with that, like how can people get involved in what you do?
Yeah, I think two really good things to think about. I think a bit like you, if you're wherever you are in the country, find someone like Youthwork Plus or 267 and just get to know them, hang out with them, because they're allies, they're for you. And so, we don't really want to promote anything, but if you're near us and you want us to cheer you on, then get in touch. Or,
what would you say is like your catchment area?
Planet Earth. I'm quite happy to go anywhere. Well, yeah, we're based in sort of Hertfordshire, so if it gets that you're nearer Milton Keynes than you are to St Albans, then back off, because I don't want to step on Becky's toes. But obviously, realistically, I want to invite someone to something that I can meet them regularly and be able to cheer them on regularly. So as great as it is to support people over the whole country, and we can do that in a whole bunch of ways with things like this, with our blogs. We do a lot of blogs like you, and I think they're really good resources. But in terms of where I think the real sort of benefit is that regular meeting up. And so we have a Youthwork collective in St Albans and Harpenden, and we meet regularly and we run events together and we have meals together and we pray together, because you can do that regularity. So I think there's a balance that we want to cheer some people on, and that can be from an occasional remote way. But actually, if you're within an appropriate distance to us, then I'd say come hang out, come to our events, get to know us, get to know the rest of the tribe, because it may be they'll just cheer you on by you being amongst us, and vice versa. You'll probably encourage them. So that's what we want to promote, is just finding people that you can do life with, really. I think the prayer thing is probably like all charities at the moment, is finance is really tough. When you grow, it's really exciting. But most of us probably grow from a position of need rather than saying we've got this X amount of money in the bank, so let's try and do something. We find we're growing because the need is growing. So we've had to grow in certain areas to be able to fulfill that need, but then you need to find the finance to be able to make that happen. So to be here 17 years on is proof that God never lets us go. I hope, he'll continue to do that. Some days it gets a bit weighty. So prayer just for peace about that would be great. But I think just continuing to have this sort of collaboration that we've been blessed by in this area, this sort of, going back to what I said about having my ego removed, I think we've been able to, over time, probably 7-8 years, just be able to meet and have meals with a bunch of key people that's now growing in terms of who's part of this group. And it's this sort of egoless group of like-minded people that, we're not the same at all by any stretch of the imagination, but we're for each other. And I think that is something I almost want God to protect, because I know, it's quite fragile at times because we've all got an agenda. But also I want it to grow, and I want more people to benefit from it. So it'd be good to pray for this sort of collaboration and unity that we've seen really bring sort of real fruit to our area.
Yeah, can definitely pray for that. And like, what advice, encouragement would you give for any youth or kids leaders listening?
Yeah, I've got three very clear ones. First of all, is like I said, find a tribe. You know, I use that word a lot, but you know, there's very few jobs in the world where being on your own is a strength. You know, it's just we all need someone to be for us. Remember my first youth work job, I had a guy called Matt and Paul. They came over every 2 weeks to see me, to buy me dinner and just ask me how it was. Without those two, I don't think I'd be here, because they were two more seasoned youth workers, and they were just for me, and they did it in a really practical way by just saying, let's have a meal every fortnight. Let's just chew the fat. And so that's almost what now shapes a lot of what I do. But finding that group of people is really essential, because, you know, when you're on your own, you take sometimes the successes, you haven't got anyone to celebrate with, and sometimes they go to your head, and then you get these ego challenges. And then the failures, you tend to let them weigh too heavily because you haven't got someone to unpick them and learn from them. And so that sort of togetherness is really helpful. So I'd say find your tribe. I think communication with your church congregation and parents is something I wish I'd learned earlier. So not just those involved in youth work, but the whole church. How do you get the whole church, even from practical things like get your church to give you a piece of the notice board and fill it with stuff that's going on? You know, how do you communicate regularly what you're spending your money on? Not to justify yourself, but to show people what exciting things are going on. And then the third thing is really super practical, is learn to rest well. You know, using our marathon illustration, it is a marathon. It's not a 100-meter dash. We've got to learn, and our sort of line managers have got to model that well and allow us to do it well. But you've got to somehow figure out, what does resting well look like for me? Because for some people, it's not stopping, it's doing something different. You know, the word recreation means recreate. It means you're doing something different to what you normally do. So for some people, going to play 2 hours of football is rest, is stopping. And so it's finding that thing that brings you that pause to be able to begin again. And you've got to prioritize it weekly, if not daily.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point, isn't it? Really important. Thanks, Mike.
I've loved this.
Anything else you want to share?
No, I think it's been a great chat. It's helped me.
Yeah, good.
I've been in the office all day on my own, writing my annual report. So this has been life-giving. So thank you, Becky. It points to the fact that we can't do these things alone.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I totally agree with you on the tribe thing as well. Like, I think it's like sometimes it feels like it's easier to be insular.
Yeah.
But in reality, it's like youth work and kids work roles are so much easier when you have other people who are supporting you, and who you are supporting. Like, ideas come out of conversation with them.
Yeah.
Like, joy in life is better as part of feeling like you're part of a wider picture. And so sometimes it feels like an effort and an extra thing to be involved with people. But in reality, I know it's so much more life bringing to me as an individual and to ministry to be connected with people.
It means you can keep going. And now, what doesn't help is our environments aren't set up for it, because if most paid workers work for really small teams, and most church leaders and vicars are quite self-starters, so they're happy to work on their own. And so you're left with no one to sort of bounce ideas on. So you need to go out and find it. because one of the key things that if we get a physical space is we almost want like a Friday hot desking space. So actually there'd be free internet, there'll be a meal, and you can come and just do your work. There'll be no input from anyone, but you can just because sometimes you just need to know there's somebody over there sitting on another desk that every half hour or so they go, do you want a cup of tea? Do you want to just chat about an idea and brainstorm? You go and get a resource off the wall. And I think those sort of finding those connecting points are really key, because sometimes our church structures are very isolating.
Yeah, totally. Well, thank you, Mike, for being involved today. It's been great to interview you. Been great to have you on.
Thanks.
Hopefully some of our listeners have been able to pick up at least one nugget from the stuff that you've shared and the answers that you've given. And thank you for those of you who've been listening. If you want to get in touch with Mike for any reason or shoot him a question or
don't say
anything.
Shoot.
Yeah. Hitman connotations are coming out.
I'm getting flashbacks now.
Then you can get in contact either with him directly,
that's fine.
or you can email us. So contact us through our Youthwork Plus website, and we can get you in touch with Mike. If you have liked this podcast, then don't forget to like, share, subscribe, comment. It helps not only you find us again, but other people find us on the algorithm. You can get in touch to if you have any comments on this podcast or stuff you might want us to cover next time, or might want us to get Mike back to talk to him about a particular topic. We'd be up for that, wouldn't we?
Yeah, absolutely.
So thank you for tuning in. I hope you have been encouraged by Mike and I's chat today. However you feel your youth or kids work is going, you're probably doing better than you think you are.
Absolutely.
And the message here is keep going. And if you need help, reach out to either Mike or I. We're happy to support you and help you and cheer you on.
Absolutely.
So thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next podcast. Bye-bye.